Hey guys, what's up? Ehren here, Question Period Canada. How was your day? How you doing? It's freezing here. It's snowing in Nova Scotia. I can't turn my heat on. I've got on this huge sweater. The good news is it's getting hot on Parliament Hill. They are flying out of control. Both sides
Eggo
flipping
waffle.
out.
Crispy, fluffy, delicious. Lego my Eggo.
And so we're going to jump right into it. It is a pretty crazy episode. It's going to be the most intense, I think, that we've seen, and the funniest too. So let's get right into it and kick off Question Period.
Oral questions. Questions.
All right, oral questions. Let's
The
go.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Let's go. Yeah. Thumbs up. Let's get it going.
When the Prime Minister flip-flopped and put a pause on his carbon tax for home heating, that didn't do anything to help Quebec. Quebecers are going to have to pay the second carbon tax, which is going to increase not only the cost of gas, but also the cost of groceries. And why? Why is the Prime Minister increasing taxes on Quebecers? Well, it's to fund a $1 billion fund that a senior official put in place as and has called a second sponsorship scandal. Why is the Prime Minister forcing Quebecers to pay for another Liberal scandal?
Another scandal. There's been so many.
The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr.
All right.
Speaker.
Diane
Mr.
is
Speaker,
going to come out of the
I have a
gate.
short question for the
No
Conservative
Trudeau
leader.
today, it doesn't look like.
What is the Conservatives' plan to
That's gonna
protect
be
the
an issue.
environment? The answer is very simple. No plan. No plan, no solutions. A real solution would be to put in place a plan to fight climate change for the future. A real solution would be to protect our environment for future generations. The Conservative leader must know that Canadians don't have a short memory, Mr. Speaker. They'll remember that what the Conservatives did when they were in power. Chop, 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 Mr. Speaker.
She's a funny
They
talker.
won't take the risk.
Very animated. And her mouth moves a funny way.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
The Prime Minister
Let's get it
promised
going.
that Wednesdays would be Prime Minister's question period. His public itinerary indicates he's in Ottawa, and he was even spotted in the building. So the question is for the Prime Minister about the carbon tax chaos he has unleashed. He has paused the tax on some heat for some people, leading the Government of Alberta to threaten a lawsuit, the Government of Saskatchewan to threaten not to collect the tax, NDP provincial parties in the West even turning against it, and some First Nations saying the entire thing is illegal. Will he reverse all of this chaos and just axe the tax?
Carbon tax chaos, eh? Axe it.
Before I have
Greg,
the Honourable
of
Minister
course,
answer
of
the
course.
question, I just want to remind all members it's important not to do indirectly what you can't do directly. As the honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, let's actually bring
We'll try
the
to discuss
temperature
Greg
down
in
and
a
talk
moment.
about exactly what we've done here.
We've got hand in his
We've
pocket.
accelerated the replacement of home heating oil for heat pumps. Mr. Speaker, it's a national program, and if the Premier of Alberta and the Premier of Saskatchewan want to make sure that people who heat their homes with oil in those provinces have access to the same heat pumps, you know what they can do, Mr. Speaker? They can join 3 Atlantic provinces and BC and sign up for a plan and help low-income people in their province. Will they do it? Time will tell.
He's trying to flip it back and put it on them.
Mr. Speaker, the question was for the Prime Minister. He has unleashed carbon tax chaos across the country. After saying he would never bend, he backed down because I kept beating him in these debates in the House of Commons. And he put a 2-year pause on some heating oil for some people, causing Saskatchewan to threaten not to collect the tax, Alberta to threaten a lawsuit, 6 provinces coming out against the plan, First Nations saying it's illegal. If he's so proud of himself and what he's done, then why won't he stand up now and defend it?
He's going hard about Trudeau. And now Greg's going to have something else to say, I'm sure. Look at him up there. You can see all the stuff he's doing. It's just small.
I ask all members, please, if you do not have the floor, to refrain from speaking so that we can hear the question and we can hear the answer. The Honourable Minister.
He's like a principal that's
Speaker, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition seems to
a substitute teacher.
patting himself on the back to actually do his homework. At the end of the day, heating oil costs anywhere between 2 and 4 times the price of natural gas. It is a particular driver of energy poverty in this country. We have taken steps forward to improve affordability by enabling the implementation of heat pumps, which will save people up to $2,500 a year, but doing so in the context of a plan to fight climate change, something again that the Leader of the Opposition has done nothing about in the years since he became the Leader of the Opposition.
Jonathan Wilkinson went off yesterday a couple of times, so I'm hoping he'll get there today.
Badly for that Liberal minister who's been abandoned by his leader, who the leader of their government won't even stand and defend his own decisions. We know that on Thursday, he suddenly, after having his door beat down by terrified Liberals about to lose their seats, decided to flip-flop and bring in a temporary pause on attacks until after the election, dividing Canadians once again into 2 different classes. If he's so proud of how he's divided people, if he's so proud of how he's forcing Canadians to choose between heating and eating, why won't he have the guts to stand up and say so now?
These clips are going to be great. Poilievre is hard on Trudeau today for not being there. And Greg's playing with his button.
The Honourable Minister.
I'll tell you who's feeling abandoned by their leader. Conservative Albertans, New Democrat Albertans, Liberal Albertans. You know why, Mr. Speaker? Because Danielle Smith is trying to take Albertans out of the Canada Pension Plan. And what do we have from the Leader of the Conservative Opposition, Mr. Speaker? Weak sauce and platitudes. The pretender to the throne can stand up here right today and say a full-throated defense of Canada Pension Plan while his 30 Alberta MPs stand in silence. Will he or won't he? I know we will, Mr. Speaker, and Albertans can count on us defending them every single day along with their pensions.
Randy flipped out. Randy just lost it. Poilievre's getting to them.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, that carbon tax question was for the Prime Minister on Prime Minister's question period today. And I know that I don't have my glasses on, but that guy doesn't look like the Prime Minister.
It's a good joke.
Mr. Speaker,
You're right, it's not.
very
It's
simple
pretty funny.
motion. It says that given that the government has announced a temporary 3-year pause to the federal carbon tax on home heating oil, the House call on the government to extend that pause to all forms of heating oil, period. Will the Prime Minister have the courage to stand up and indicate whether the vote on this motion will be a free vote for his members?
It's interesting. He's really sticking it to Trudeau today. There's lots of time left. It's going to get worse. I bet you Greg gets more out of hand. Look at him.
The Honourable
And he's
Minister.
doing it to both sides now.
Thank you, Mr.
Like
Speaker.
I noticed
Those of
yesterday,
us
he
on
was
this
hard
side
on
of
the
House
Liberals even.
prefer to do good public policy rather than simply just play politics. I know that is an idea that seems to be foreign to the Leader of the Opposition. Heating oil is 2 to 4 times expensive as natural gas. It is a particularly acute issue for people in a number of provinces, not just in Atlantic Canada. The program that we are putting into place applies across the country. It is to ensure that we are addressing concerns around affordability in a thoughtful way while also addressing concerns around climate change, which I'm sure their children will tell them is a very important issue.
It's funny. He's letting them know that their
Honourable
children
Member
know,
for
but they
Prairie.
don't. So
Mr. Speaker, the Bloc
was
Québécois motion
trying.
that we'll be voting on later today calls on the government to review its immigration
Bloc
targets
Québécois, eh?
starting in 2024 after consulting Quebec and the provinces on how many immigrants they are able to welcome. And yet the minister is ready to unveil his targets, even though nobody's been consulted. Quebec's immigration minister confirmed it earlier today. There has been no consultation. So instead of doing one thing and voting for something else, will the minister cancel his press conference later today and consult Quebec before announcing his immigration targets?
The
The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, first of all, that's false. We
goofy.
have consulted Quebec. Our officials speak with their officials every day. I also spoke directly with the minister about the targets and targets for refugees as well. I've asked them to make an additional effort. Obviously, we're consulting. We're not always in agreement, but I would ask the member to look at the plan and look at the Quebec-Canada agreement, which says to be determined. So there are still elements that are up to Quebec to decide. The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Mr. Speaker, there's a limit to how much you can say that doesn't have any meaning. Quebec hasn't been consulted on the federal immigration targets. Quebec confirmed that today. That means that the targets that the federal government is going to announce today don't take into account Quebec's ability to welcome immigrants. Does the minister know how many classrooms he's going to have to open to welcome new immigrants in 2024? Because we're going to have more speech therapists, more psychotherapists, and more teachers. If the minister doesn't have those answers, is he at least going to cancel his press conference, go get the answers from
It's
Quebec
getting
and
heated
the
up.
provinces?
That's a new issue. They haven't been raising that one yet.
The
He
Honourable
seems
Minister.
pretty committed to it.
Well, in an hour and a half, people will have the opportunity to see the plan itself. I would ask them to have a look at it, but when it comes to Quebec, since 1991, we have the Canada-Quebec Agreement, and under that agreement, we send $700 million a year to Quebec, and do we ask them what's done with it? No, that's the kind of relationship we have. Maybe we should be asking questions, but the reality is that they can spend that money to adapt their ability to welcome immigrants, and we will support them in that.
Mark's not really good at sticking it
Honourable
back.
Member for
Like
Burnaby
he just
South.
kind of takes the hard
Prime
question.
Minister's made it
and
very clear that only
I don't know about
those who
Jagmeet.
vote for Liberals will get
Big
relief
letdown.
on their home heating, which has divided Canada and undermined the fight against climate crisis. Canadians want to do the right thing, but they can't, for example, navigate the onerous government programs for a heat pump and end up giving up. So instead of dividing Canadians, will the Prime Minister tax the excess profits of oil and gas companies and use that revenue to help all Canadians?
I do like the sound of that point, though, the question. Tax the big earners. Go easy on the people that don't earn as much.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, I would encourage the honourable leader of the New Democratic Party to do his homework. In terms of an onerous program, people who actually are going to be in receipt of a heat pump go up and sign online, and 3 days later they get a check to ensure that they can actually do the installation. There is no onerous program, Mr. Speaker. At the end of the day, we have developed a plan to address a key affordability issue in a manner that is consistent with fighting climate change. It is good public policy, and we will carry it out.
The Honourable Member from Burnaby South.
The government's been clear. You have to vote Liberal if you want some help with home heating. It's as if it's the Duplessis era all over again. And who benefits from this? The big oil and gas companies, who continue to receive grants and subsidies from the federal government and who continue to make record profits. Will the Prime Minister stop taking us back to the era of Duplessis and help all Canadians?
The Honourable Minister.
Merci, Monsieur.
Jonathan's getting
Thank
a
you,
lot
Mr.
of
Speaker.
floor time today.
The program that we're discussing today applies everywhere in Canada. It's something that's very important. We've put in place a program to ensure that there's affordability for Canadians and also to ensure that we can fight climate change. It's good policy. It's something that's very important for Canadians.
That's a pretty quick answer. He didn't have much for that one.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
All right, here we go.
The Prime Minister,
Pierre's going to go snapping.
His lone Liberal MP in Edmonton was asked, quote, Western Canada, that they're being left out of this whole home heating oil and the exemption for home heat from the carbon price. Should natural gas be added to that? He said, no, I'm not concerned at all. He then went on to say that if Albertans want to have the exemption, they can switch their furnaces over to oil. What? Does the Prime Minister agree with his member from Edmonton that Albertans should spend thousands of dollars putting in a more emitting source of energy just to avoid paying the carbon tax?
It's pretty crazy. There'll be people doing that. On the button, look at him. It's building up. It agitates both sides when he does this. They're being treated like children. They're the MPs and he's acting like they're kids.
The Honourable Minister.
The hockey team that plays in my home city is called the Oilers, and we just handed a defeat to his former team, the Flames. But that being said, Mr. Speaker, if I misspoke, let me be clear in this House. Albertans right now can actually use a federal program to go from natural gas to a heat pump with a $5,000 credit from our government or a $40,000 interest-free loan. It's the Green Homes Program, it's the Green Loans Program, and if Premier Smith wants to extend free home pumps to Albertans to get off of heating oil, she can join Atlantic Premiers and work with the feds to make exactly that happen.
Flipping it back on the provinces again.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
All
I
right,
can understand why the Prime Minister didn't want to stand up and defend that comment from his Liberal member. But, you know, this comment is similar to what we heard from Paul McLaughlin. He's the president of the
He keeps
Rural
taking digs
Municipalities
at
of
Trudeau's
Alberta.
not there. It's
And
funny.
he said, and I quote, "If I have an understanding that I can buy heating oil, which is effectively kerosene, and I can buy it with no carbon levy, I will change all my grain drying and my barn heating to heating oil." I'll tell you right now, there are folks doing the math. So the government is now incentivizing farmers to spend money shifting from natural gas drying and heating over to oil heating, which has higher emissions. This makes no sense. Why won't he just shake off this lunacy and axe the tax?
Lunacy. This is great. This is great. It's pretty fun. Uh-oh, look at Greg. He's putting his foot
The
down.
Honourable Minister.
Again.
Thank you, Mr.
That's like
Speaker.
5 or 8 times.
Heating oil, perhaps the honourable member does not understand this. Heating oil is 2 to 4 times as expensive as natural gas. It is a particularly acute issue with respect to heating and affordability. I would tell you, though, that he should also be aware that the exemption is for 3 years, during which time people are expected to implement heat pumps to ensure that they actually have an affordable way to address this issue, but in a manner that is consistent with fighting climate change, something, again, that the honourable leader either doesn't believe in or certainly doesn't think is important.
One of these Liberal MPs got to start firing
The
back
Leader
because
of the
Poilievre
Opposition.
is relentless
Well, the
today.
question
And he's
was
on
for
again.
The Prime
Again.
Minister. I'm glad this member answered because he reminded Atlantic Canadians that it is just a pause and that if they re-elect this Prime Minister, they will get a massive tax increase on their home heating oil. And where is all the money going? We now know that 60% of Canadians pay more in carbon taxes than they get back in rebates. The difference is funding this wasteful government. We now know that a senior member of the Liberal government's bureaucracy compared their billion-dollar green fund to the sponsorship scandal, saying that it was massive incompetence. Who got rich and who will have to pay?
Who did get rich? We're going to have to pay, right?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Minister of Innovation welcomes the decision of the Auditor General to conduct an audit, and he also welcomes the invitation that he received to committee next week, where he will be answering Conservative questions with respect to this entire issue, Mr. Speaker. I would also note that the organization has agreed to cooperate fully and is enabling all documents and information to be provided to the Auditor General. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Liberals don't have any life in them to this point, but
Carbon tax
Poilievre's going to get to them.
chaos continues.
He
The
will.
incoming leader of the Liberal Party, Mark Carney, has weighed in and said that he, quote, "I would have looked for other ways to provide support than the route chosen, not least of because what is important is that clarity in terms of the overall plan, the overall direction." So now we have an incoming Liberal leader taking pot shots at an outgoing Liberal Prime Minister who is in hiding. How much longer can Canadians deal with this carbon tax chaos before we get an election and choose a common sense Conservative candidate?
Common sense, conservative, carbon tax chaos, Trudeau's hiding. This is great. Canadian politics is fun, guys. They don't do this in the States. They don't go at it like this. But watch Greg. What is he doing up there? Just
Colleagues, before I pass on to the Parliamentary Secretary to answer the question, I'd like to remind all members, and out of profound respect to the position and the office of the Leader of the Opposition, I again want to remind all members to please take a look at the statement which I made regarding decorum in the House in terms of understanding what all members have to do in terms of their work. I'll pass on the question to the Parliamentary Secretary to respond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Seems sour they didn't listen.
And if you don't have a plan to fight climate change and protect the environment, then you don't have a plan for the economy or for affordability either. And it's very clear that the Conservative plan is just to cut funding for social services like the Canada Child Benefit and our dental plan and seniors funding and the dental benefit, which has just recently surpassed 200,000 children, Mr. Speaker. The Conservative plan to fix global inflation by cutting people's services is not going to work. It's risky, irresponsible, and it's absolutely reckless, just like the Conservative leader.
Oh, he took a dig. You're not allowed to do that. Okay, let's see what Greg says. Now it's a Liberal doing it. Let's see. Let's see how fair everything's going to be now.
Again, I'd like to remind all members in the questions and their answers is that you will want to make sure that you are not impugning to individual members.
Don't impugn to individual members.
Questions that I raised regarding their courage, their intelligence, or even their presence in the House. I ask all members, please, to exercise some great restraint and decorum. We can have passionate debates in this House, and there are ways which we can do so within the rules that have been established by this place.
It doesn't seem like he does want passionate debates at all.
Answering my questions and engaging me in debate, the Prime Minister forces yet another random Liberal to read off PMO talking points about the carbon tax chaos that is unfolding in this country. He's got one province threatening lawsuits, another not collecting the tax at all. He's got NDP provincial governments and parties turning against him, even though he's in coalition with that same party. Will he end the carbon tax chaos and agree to my motion to simply treat every single Canadian equally and take the tax off so that Canadians can keep the heat on?
Literally, I can't keep my heat on. I did turn it on today because this morning it was freezing. I had to take some of the...
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not
But
sure
it's
if
off
the
now.
honourable
It's
member
snowing
is
out.
actually listening to the responses, but at the end of the day, heating oil is 2 to 4 times as expensive as natural gas. It is a particularly acute issue with respect to affordability. We have come up with a program that will enable folks to be able to put in place something that will save them significant money while being consistent with the fight against climate change. It is, I would say, appalling that in this day and age, we still have a party in this chamber, the Conservative Party of Canada, that has no policy and not even any belief in the reality of climate change. It is time that that changed, and Canadians will make that happen in the next election.
Jonathan used all his energy yesterday. I even said yesterday he must have taken his vitamins because he was so full of energy. Poilievre again?
Said he would
Awesome.
have Wednesday Prime Minister's question period, that he would show up for work and answer questions. But here we are less than a week after he had to back down and pause his signature policy, the massive new carbon tax. His plan now is to quadruple that tax to 61 cents a litre, forcing seniors everywhere to choose between eating and heating. If that's really the right thing to do, then why doesn't he have the guts to stand up and defend that policy before Canadians here and now?
Where is Trudeau? He's going hard at the fact that he's not there. He's going to get in trouble with Greg again. This is preposterous.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Greg should
the price
resign.
on pollution is one part of a comprehensive approach to addressing the climate issue. It is implemented in a manner that is affordable. The majority of Canadians get more money back than they pay on the price on pollution. Having a thoughtful approach to climate change is an important part of being a real and realistic political party in this country. You cannot actually have an environmental policy without a climate policy. You cannot actually have an effective economic plan for the future without recognizing the reality of climate change. It is time they entered the modern era.
Well. There are insults in what he's saying. He
for
just
Saint-Jean.
delivers it like
Mr. Speaker, the Bloc Québécois
peacefully.
motion that the minister is going to support later today talks about successful immigration. Well, immigration can't be successful when the targets don't take into account the ability to welcome new immigrants. And the Conference Board revealed yesterday a huge number of immigrants who are leaving Canada. They're disappointed. There were 60,000 who left in 2017 and then 67,000 who left 2 years later. Among the reasons are the lack of access to housing and the difficult time they're having getting into the economy. Can the minister go back, do his homework, consult Quebec instead of announcing targets that are completely disconnected from our ability to welcome new immigrants?
This is a little off topic, but she's the most casually dressed of
Honourable
all
Minister.
the MPs, always just wearing
It's clear
like
that
scrubs.
we always need to do the best that we can to make sure people immigrate to society. But what we're seeing is an unprecedented number of people who want to come to Canada. And the reality in all of this, Mr. Speaker, is that we see the number of people who want to come to Canada because it's a great country for welcoming new immigrants. If the Bloc Québécois is saying that we can't welcome those immigrants, I think that's bad faith on their part.
Mark is one of the more boring
Before I
MPs.
give, the floor to the honourable member for Saint-Jean, I would just like to encourage all members who have not been recognized by the Speaker to please leave the floor to those who have been recognized to ask their questions and to answer questions. The honourable member for Saint-Jean.
I bet you Greg's going to resign.
Quebec has confirmed
He'll get
that
fed
they
up.
were not consulted. That means that the immigration targets that the minister is going to unveil later today don't take into account the offer of services. They don't take into account the number of seats in our schools, the number of places in daycares, our ability to teach new immigrants French, the housing crisis, infrastructure that we need to build to increase, to support the increased numbers of the population. So if it's not based on any of that, what are the minister's targets based on? Astrology? The stars?
Making fun of him.
The honourable minister. Well, I'm not sure about astrology, Mr. Speaker, but the member across the way was in the House, or rather was clearly not listening yesterday when I gave my speech, because I listed everything that we've done in collaboration with Quebec to make sure that things go well. And this agreement between Canada and Quebec has been in place as long as the bloc has existed, since 1991. And this jurisdiction remains with Quebec.
His responses always seem short.
Is, and this question is for the Prime Minister, that the carbon tax chaos is unfolding within the Liberal tent itself. We saw last week, just as I was about to hold a thunderous rally of 1,000 common-sense Nova Scotians against to axe the tax, the Prime Minister was in a sweaty ball on the ground. He had to flip-flop and hold a hastily called and humiliating press conference. Now, Mark Carney has come out against his flip-flop, and Percy Down, a loyal Liberal senator, has called for the Prime Minister to resign because of his fiscal irresponsibility. Is that why he's hiding under his desk and refusing to answer questions today?
Oh my God. Hiding under his desk? It's pretty fun, guys. Canadian politics.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Other than trying to find ways to do indirectly what he is not actually allowed to do directly, the one thing that is consistent about the Leader of the Opposition is that he loves to pat himself on the back continuously. At the end of the day, what we are interested in on this side of the House is good public policy. We have put into place a plan that will assure affordability for Canadians, that applies across the country, that does so in a manner that actually addresses the reality of climate change. Once again, it is appalling and a shame that the Conservative Party does not believe in climate change, has no plan to do anything about it.
Did you catch at the very beginning there? He was telling Greg to do his job? Because he was telling Fergus to do his job.
Mr. Percy Down wrote, and I quote, "The opportunity for a Conservative government has been created by a lack of fiscal responsibility by the Liberal government, and the damage it has caused our economy is now showing up in the opinion polls. Within the Liberal Party, many members who are in favor of fiscal responsibility have given up on this current iteration of the Liberal Party, and hence the leader should resign." Yet he won't stand and answer questions, even though his itinerary shows that he was in this building today. If he won't show up and do his job, why won't he get out of the way? Because I will.
Oh my Lord. Pierre is on fire today. I've never seen him hotter than this. Or speaking more than this. I've never seen it. Have you? Look, they're all standing up and clapping still. Greg's going to lose it. Look, he's turning up. Look. Clean house, they say. Clean the rot out of this house.
Over the last 2 weeks, many members have taken upon themselves to quote my statement back to me, and I'm quite happy to defend that statement. As your chair, again, I will say that it is important for us to recognize that all members have duties, all members of this House, regardless of which side you have, which sometimes takes them out of this chamber to do their duties. That's the reason, that is the reason
He's explaining why Trudeau's not there.
That is
Listen.
the reason why that we try not to mention whether or not the member is present or not in the House. It's part of the duties. So,
He's making an excuse for Trudeau. It sounds like to me.
To continue on, I believe there is the Honourable House Leader is going to answer this question.
We'll never get that minute back.
The last thing that the Honourable Leader of the Opposition
Oh,
said
no.
particularly troubling, because
It's
it is
been hot the last
Canadians
couple
who
days,
decide
more
who sit
wound up.
in this House and not the Leader of the Opposition. But, Mr. Speaker, let me be very clear that it's troubling, but it's not surprising, because when he was the Minister of Democratic Reform, Mr. Speaker, he made it harder for 150,000 of Canada's most vulnerable citizens to vote. He was also sanctioned by Elections Canada for violating electoral law. While what he's saying is completely inappropriate, it is unsurprising given his track record and his lack of respect for democracy.
Karina Gold. Good for you. She came firing back, slinging all the mud. Sorry, this is pretty entertaining. I find this a lot of fun.
Again, colleagues, it is so important.
Somebody just said shut up to you.
Hello.
Oh my God. They're flipping out.
Colleagues, it is important, once again, to not call in.
Sit down, speaker is up.
Oh my
Can I
Lord.
ask the member, please,
Oh my Lord.
from Surrey, to please allow me to continue. Colleagues, I ask all members to please exercise discretion. These are the things which you all raised with me and others in terms of improving the discretion. So, I'm going to ask the Honourable Leader of the colleagues.
Go to a wide shot.
Colleagues.
Go to the wide shot so we can see what's happening.
He should be sit down.
May I ask?
Holy.
May I ask all colleagues? Excuse me.
This is crazy, guys.
Colleagues.
This is crazy, right?
Colleagues. Temperatures are running hot. Temperatures are running hot today. If I could ask all members, please, to sit down. May I ask all members to respectfully sit down, please?
He's telling them
Ask
to.
all members to respectfully sit down until I recognize
I'm
them
almost starting to feel
speak.
sorry for him.
Please.
I've never seen anything like it, and now they're making note. They're getting up.
Colleagues. Colleagues. Colleagues.
I suspected it was going to be a fun episode because it's been building up, but look at this. How long has this been going on? 3 minutes?
The honourable member of the honourable leader of the opposition.
He stopped trying to give his speech. He just tossed it back to them. He's defeated. Hey, guys. That stuff is fun.
Mr. Speaker,
I think it is.
I can understand as these Liberal members watch their Prime Minister in a panicked huddle in the fetal position, shaking and trembling.
Shaking and
They're losing
trembling.
control of themselves. The last few days of carbon tax chaos has been very hard on them, and now their leader is defending them. The minister says we should let Canadians decide. So why don't we pause the carbon tax on all home heat until the vote, when Canadians will decide whether they want the Prime Minister's plan to hike the tax 61 cents a litre, or my common sense plan to axe the tax for everyone forever?
It's good. He tried to be, keep it low-key that time. It's interesting.
The Honourable Minister.
I'm waiting for him to start to yell too.
We are united on the fact that the leader
Mark's not going to take
of
it.
the opposition
He's going to flip
is
out.
trying to destroy the action that our government is taking on climate change. Not only our government, but governments across the world that are finally turning the tide, because he wants to go back to the time when they were attacking climate action. Mr. Speaker, we're united in the fact that we led the G7 in 2020 and 2022 in growth, that we're going to be #1 again in 2024, that 64,000 jobs were created in Canada. Which country would he change places with? When he denigrates Canada, what country does he think better? Because this is the greatest country in the world, and we will stand up for it, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, good on Mark. He flipped out. He just kind of lost it at the end there. Getting some life out of these liberals that are getting slammed today.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Poilievre's going to have something
we
funny.
have
Come
someone
on.
now
What do you got?
auditioning for the job of Prime Minister.
Hey.
And the cat's away. The mice will play, but we don't need any more of this chaos. The NDP would actually do its job and hold this government to account. They would announce today they would vote in accordance with the views of the NDP in BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and now Manitoba, all of whom agree that people in cold climates, whether it be in Timmins or Kapuskasing or Churchill, should enjoy tax-free heat. So will they vote to keep the heat on by taking the tax off, or will they once again serve this out-of-touch Prime Minister?
I think Poilievre may have listened to Fergie a little bit there because he didn't poke at the Prime Minister hiding under his desk that time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I've said a number of times, and perhaps the Honourable Leader of the Opposition has not heard me, the home heating oil is up to 4 times as expensive as natural gas. It creates challenges with respect to affordability for Canadians. We have come forward with a plan that applies in every province and territory in this country that will address that particular issue in a manner that will be affordable, that will ensure long-term savings for families, but will do so in a manner that continues the fight against climate change, a fight against climate change that would not happen if he was in the other side of the House.
Is Greg going to say anything about
The
that?
Honourable Member from Burnaby South.
No, he's letting them roll now.
Yesterday,
He got denied.
a Palestinian refugee camp was bombed by the Israeli Defense Forces. We saw lifeless children being pulled out of the rubble. We heard agonizing screams of the worst human suffering. Palestinians in Gaza are being used as human shields and being bombed for crimes they haven't committed. Canada cannot stand by while innocent people die. We must demand a ceasefire and a release of all hostages now. How can this Prime Minister defend abstaining from the UN call for a ceasefire?
The UN is calling for a ceasefire? We're not on
The
board?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I think with every member of this House of Commons, we are looking at the situation in Gaza and in Israel as a crisis that is of proportions that are dire and are causing us to lose sleep at night. And so we continue to negotiate the best way possible for hostages to be released. We continue to work at getting humanitarian aid into the area and getting Canadians out. We will continue to monitor the situation even as hearts are breaking. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Burnaby South.
The media have reported that members of the Canadian Armed Forces are currently in Israel. Canada cannot participate in the bloodshed and death of innocent people. The Prime Minister has not called for a ceasefire, and he is not joining in the calls of the United Nations. Can the Prime Minister confirm that no Canadian troops will take part in the war?
He's not talking about heating prices now because people are blaming him for it keeping up because the coalition government could be broken, which would
we are not
end up having an election.
military assistance to Israel. What we're doing, Mr. Speaker, is we're providing force protection for Canadians and assisting the Canadian Embassy in Israel with contingency planning. This is similar to CANSOMCOM presence and assistance we have provided in other instances, including in Sudan. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Honorable Député, the honourable member from Richmond Centre.
Mr. Speaker, our government are focused on building a Canada-wide early learning and childcare system. But we know that this will not be possible without the hard work of all our early childhood educators. Attracting and
So one of the things that they do during question period, there's a couple of segments when the one party will ask its own party a question about a program that they have in place, and they're doing that. And when they do it, it drives me crazy. They do it so it's so lazy, so lazy.
The honourable member, Minister.
No problem, Darryl.
Mr. Speaker,
Thanks for watching.
Early childhood educators deserve to be well compensated and respected. That's why on Monday, alongside the province of British Columbia, my colleague, the Minister of Families, Children and Social Development, announced a $2 per hour wage increase for eligible early childhood educators effective December 1st of this year, Mr. Speaker. In the first 2 years, Mr. Speaker, British Columbia has created an additional 10,000 childcare spaces, and parents have been saving up to $550 per month per child, Mr. Speaker. This is what happens when governments work together. We can deliver even more for Canadians.
I don't know about all that.
The honourable member
when they
from
do
Leeds,
those
Grenville,
tee-ups, it's
Thousand Islands, and Rideau
awful. It's so
Lakes.
lazy.
After
They
8
can make
years
it
of this
exciting, but they don't.
NDP Liberal
Mike
government,
Barrett
Canadians are
is gonna
struggling
go.
to eat, heat, and house themselves, but money from the carbon tax is lining the pockets of Liberal insiders. One government official said that it is sponsorship scandal level giveaway. It's clear that this Prime Minister isn't worth the cost when his billion-dollar green slush fund already has $40 million under investigation. One insider, Annette Verscheren, is a friend of the Prime Minister. Turns out she's also chair of the board. Can the Prime Minister stand up and tell us how much his friend received in contracts from his billion-dollar slush fund?
Mike is not listening to Fergie. He's stuck it to him. Hopefully get it going again.
Mr. Speaker, I find it interesting that the Conservative
She finds
member
everything
began his
interesting.
question by talking about the affordability crisis here in Canada, but didn't end it that way. Allow me to address the fact that Canadians are struggling right now and that the supports that we have put in place are helping them to make ends meet, Mr. Speaker, whether it be the supports through our childcare program, whether it be supports to Canadians who are having a hard time paying for their rent or paying for their mortgage, Mr. Speaker. We have lifted over 2.3 million Canadians out of poverty since coming into government, Mr. Speaker. These programs work, and we will continue to make sure that Canadians benefit from them.
The honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
It's astounding to hear that this member is saying that this program works. This program is under investigation. $40 million, that's the subject of gross mismanagement and conflicts of interest in the Prime Minister's billion-dollar green slush fund. 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, they're picking Canadians' pockets with this carbon tax and putting it into Liberal insiders' pockets. This is a Prime Minister that clearly isn't worth the cost. His friend is chair of the board. She is receiving contracts. Can they tell us exactly how much of the money they've taken out of Canadians' pockets that he's put in the pocket of his friend?
It's pretty good, Mike. It's pretty good. Picking their pockets.
The honourable parliamentary secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I mentioned earlier, with respect to SDTC, the Minister of Innovation welcomes the decision of the Auditor General to conduct a full audit. The SDTC has agreed to provide all of the information and documents necessary to the committee, and I understand that the Minister of Innovation will be appearing before the committee next week in order to answer everyone's questions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah, they're sending in
the
FPC, I guess, that's going to fix all the problems.
After 8 years, the Prime Minister's new Liberal scandal has exploded. Once, this one is the billion-dollar Green Fund slush fund, which is being investigated by the Auditor General. This has come from the bloc-supported carbon tax. Daniel Leblanc from Radio-Canada stated that this is similar to the sponsorship scandal. Can the Prime Minister rise today and clearly say which Liberal friends have benefited from this bad generosity? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker,
Gerard will be back, and he'll be intense.
what we
He
expect
always
of organizations is that they
levels up.
respect the strictest guidelines of governance. As I said earlier, the Minister for Innovation warmly welcomed the conclusions of the Auditor General of Canada to proceed with an audit, and the Minister himself will appear before the committee next week in order to respond to questions. Thank you very much. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint-Laurent. Mr. Speaker, whistleblowers are very disappointed by how slow the government has been acting. In the same report, a high-ranking bureaucrat said this was negligence and laziness, purely and simply. That's what this
Look at his eyes.
bureaucrat has said about this Liberal government's management. After 8 years of this Liberal government, another proof that they are not worth the cost. Why did the Prime Minister drag his heels in this affair, which does look like the sponsorship scandal at the end of the day? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I can confirm today
It's pretty
that
good
the Department
that
is
they've
working
slowed
in
down
close
for a moment.
collaboration with the
I needed
Office
a
of the
break.
Auditor
It's
General
been
on the question.
intense for
And
40
this,
minutes.
since the very beginning of their work, as I said earlier on, the Minister for Innovation warmly welcomes the Auditor General's decision to move forward with an audit. Mr. Speaker, the Minister will appear before committee and Conservative questions and other parties' questions next week at committee. The Honourable Member for Terrebonne.
Okay.
Mr. Speaker, a quarter of a
Quebecois.
million businesses are threatened with bankruptcy if the federal government does not defer payment of the emergency account loans without loss of subsidy. If the government thinks it's expensive to help SMEs, it hasn't calculated how much it costs to abandon them. How many businesses will be unable to repay the loan in full? How many recoveries will it have to initiate to get its money back? How many workers will end up on employment insurance? Mr. Speaker, when will the Minister finally realise that it will cost her dearly to bankrupt 250,000 companies?
Not a bad point.
The Honourable Minister.
Okay. She's going to talk about, I used to own a small business.
That small businesses are still trying to get over the pandemic, and that is a reason for which we recently announced a one-year extension for reimbursements, more flexibility for financing, and more time to have access to other loans. This on top of an increase that we have brought to the Canadian childcare benefit, and so that childcare can be only $10 a day, so that more women can enter the labour force. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member
During
for
this
Terrebonne.
quiet period, I'll ask for you
Mr.
all
Speaker,
to like if you haven't
that kind
already.
of information is
Appreciate it. Thank you.
disinformation. It's hard to believe that we have to explain to a government that it's not economically viable to cause 250,000 businesses bankruptcies. But we'll soldier on. The government thinks that by being tough on our SMEs, it is helping to fight inflation. Quite the contrary. With bankruptcies, it will create scarcity in the supply of goods and services, and that could be reflected in the prices paid by Canadians. It could therefore increase the cost of living as well as sabotaging our local economies. Why run this risk when the government could simply be more flexible with our SMEs? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't think that scaring our SMEs is the right solution.
Bebo here, right?
We were there to help them with the emergency fund, with wage subsidies.
She's WEF.
With, rent
Just saying.
Assistance. It's the federal
If you know
government
what that
gave
means.
8 out of $10 in all assistance throughout the pandemic. We're here for SMEs, and we are now transitioning towards a more private sector approach. So we invite companies to make the transition. There are still 3 years of flexibility with us and with various program conditions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Charlesbourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, the Minister for the Environment has said that under his watch, he will never grant further exemptions for the carbon tax. He seems to think that only the Atlantic provinces are suffering from carbon taxes, and at the same time, what is the Bloc up to? They want to radically increase Liberal taxes. It's just Conservatives that care for Quebecers. Can the Minister finally get out of the way so that carbon taxes can be cancelled throughout the country?
Given the sly look.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Mr.
Okay.
Speaker.
See if Adam's going to be
And once
sassy again. He got in trouble last time he was up.
There is no federal carbon tax in Quebec. Conservatives have not haven't created a plan to fight climate change and to reduce emissions. They have absolutely no vision on how we could adapt to climate change's effect. This is not only irresponsible, but it's also just a proof of incompetence, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member for Miramichi Grand Lake.
Mr. Speaker, last week a desperate Prime Minister admitted his punishing carbon tax is making life more expensive for all Canadians. He also said, if re-elected, the NDP Liberal government will quadruple the carbon tax on home heating, gas and groceries. After 8 years, this Prime Minister is now admitting he's just not worth the cost. Will the Prime Minister stop the gimmicks, stop the temporary measures, stop the bogus claims and axe the carbon tax for all Canadians for good?
Hey! Jake Stewart going off. Got wound up there. Pretty fun. They're not going at Trudeau anymore, though. Notice that?
Any doubt, the leader of the Conservatives has made it perfectly clear for Canadians. Conservatives have no plan to fight climate change. They want to take Canada backwards on climate action. The Conservatives all ran on a promise in 2021 to price carbon, but when they ditched Ehren O'Toole, they ditched any progressive values they once had and the words climate change from their vernacular. Mr. Speaker, their lack of a plan on climate change is risky and irresponsible. They should get with the program and realize that climate change is a real problem in Canada and around the world.
Do you find climate change is a bigger problem than economics right now, like day-to-day living?
The panicking Prime Minister is plummeting in the polls.
Perkins.
And the nervous Nelly Atlantic Liberal MPs are whining, please help save us. The NDP Liberal government solution? Put the carbon tax up 61 cents after the next election. In other words, vote Liberal to quadruple the carbon tax after the next election, or vote Conservative to axe the tax. This flip-flopping Prime Minister now admits he's not worth the cost. Will the Prime Minister come clean and tell Atlantic Canadians just how much will the carbon tax cost after the next election?
It feels like they're campaigning already. There's not even an election.
The Honourable Minister.
The Conservative leader's comment
that
about
we know
the
of that's coming
thunderous
up.
Rally that was held on the East Coast, and perhaps refer to the gigantic one that was held in my riding. There's a user on Twitter called The Answer Is No, and it's kind of funny. They spread it around. They criticize me quite often too. But the trick is they ask a question, but the answer is always no. So last week, his question was, did the Conservative leader's gigantic rally draw more people than a Saturday at the St. John's dump? The answer is no. No, Mr. Speaker.
Seamus O'Regan went hard.
Pro resident noted there were more people at the Cowan Plaza bingo. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
That's pretty funny, but Greg has to say something. Like, you can't not say something now. He just said there was more people at the dump than the Conservative rally.
The Honourable Member for Ehren.
Oh, Lord. That's something.
Mr. Speaker, COVID-19 has demonstrated the importance of pandemic preparedness. Vaccination is one of the most effective tools we have to help protect public health in general from COVID-19 and to prevent severe forms of the disease. Can the Minister for Health inform the House of his visit to the new Moderna plant in Laval and what this means for Canadians? The Honourable Minister for Health.
All right, Mark went crazy last time, so we'll see.
Thank you to my colleague for his excellent question. And thank you for his excellent work.
He won't go off because he's speaking French and his
clear,
French
Mr.
isn't
Speaker,
that strong.
Vaccines are responsible for saving millions of lives. Canada had one of the best responses. I had the privilege of visiting the new Moderna plant in Laval last Friday, a site where future vaccines will be manufactured right here in Canada. This is essential. It is essential to produce the next generation of vaccines here in Canada to protect our health and security, Mr. Speaker.
He used all of his energy when he exploded there a couple of minutes ago.
Calgary, Rocky Ridge.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years, the desperation of this NDP Liberal government proves that the
Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Liberals admitted that the carbon tax exemption was not granted to Western Canadians because they don't vote Liberal. The Minister for Edmonton Centre and the member for Calgary Skyview are either so ineffective that the Prime Minister just ignores them, or they actually agree that Alberta should pay more to keep the heat on. Will the Prime Minister take the heat off home heating for all Canadians? Yes or no?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the Honourable Member for the question. And as he knows, we have the opportunity in Alberta to join the federal government to provide heat pumps for those who need it. But Mr. Speaker, let's look at the facts. What is the MP for Calgary Skyview and the MP for Edmonton Centre happens to be me? What have we done for Albertans? We have worked with this Liberal government to cut child poverty over by half, Mr. Speaker. We've delivered a Canada Child benefit to our ridings. Mr. Speaker, we have implemented $10 a day childcare, and we got a new pipeline to Tidewater, something the people on that side of the aisle could never accomplish, Mr. Speaker. 2 Liberals have done more than 30 MPs in 6 years. They don't like it, we do, and so do Canadians.
That's good for Randy. That's 2 times that he popped back.
The Honourable Member from Yorkton Melville.
They can't just take it, right? Like,
well, this Prime Minister's finally admitting he's not worth the cost. He removed his punitive carbon tax on home heating oil, temporarily relieving the burden on the backs of 3% of Canadians. Over 90% of Saskatchewan households are heated with natural gas. Higher taxes for them because they don't vote Liberal? Well, Saskatchewan cleaned its house in 2019, and now coast to coast to coast, Canadians are calling for a majority, common-sense Conservative government that will axe the tax. How about dem apples, Mr. Prime Minister?
how about dem apples? I didn't know that Kathy Wagentall had that in her. When I saw her with the script, I thought, I just don't like it when the Conservatives use paper.
As I've said a couple of times, heating oil is up to 4 times as expensive as natural gas. It creates affordability challenges. We've actually put into place measures that will ensure affordability, that families will save up to $2,500 a year going forward, but in a manner that actually addresses the climate crisis. I would say to my honourable member, she also may want to do her homework with respect to programs that are in place that enable the replacement of natural gas-fired furnaces with heat pumps. It's called the Green Buildings Plan. It's called the Green Buildings Loan.
The Honourable Member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. Mr. Speaker, Quebecers now know that it costs a lot to vote for the Bloc Québécois. The Bloc Québécois voted for the second carbon tax, and this Liberal government has decided to create 2 classes of Canadians. On the one hand, Atlantic Canadians, and then the others. Quebecers and other Canadians will not be entitled to the temporary rebate on the carbon tax. This Prime Minister says that there will be no other exemptions. This makes no sense. After 8 years, this government has lost control and Canadians are getting poorer. Can the government finally get its act together and cancel this carbon tax across the country now? The Honourable Minister.
Okay.
Mr. Speaker,
she started the show.
I'm
Diane.
not surprised by the participation of my colleagues from Quebec on the other side with the Conservatives.
He's got funny everything.
Colleague asked his colleague for Louis Saint-Laurent why, when he was at the Quebec National Assembly, why he said that he was very satisfied with the carbon pricing system. This is what he said. We are satisfied that there is now a registry for greenhouse gas emissions. We're happy that this information will be published. It shows that we are all united by transparency here in this chamber. A shame, shame on them.
She's trying to shame them. I don't think the Conservatives are going to take it lightly.
Colleagues.
I'd love to see Poilievre one more time, but I got a feeling it's not happening. How crazy was that when Greg interrupted like for 5 minutes? And they wouldn't listen. They kept getting worse. So, and he's doing it again, playing with his button. Yeah. And he defended Trudeau. He defended Trudeau, the speaker. It's
the
crazy.
Conservative Party is blocking 2 vital pieces of legislation that will create sustainable jobs, bring workers to the table, and build important renewable energy projects. First, they blocked workers from speaking at committee, then they canceled debate in this chamber, and now they are filibustering the Natural Resources Committee to stop consideration of C-50 and C-49. Can the minister from this House inform the House about the importance of the Sustainable Jobs Act and Atlantic Accords Act.
So this is one of those tee-ups that I was talking about earlier. See how lazy it is? Now he's right from a script, like he should have a little speech prepared, ready to rock it out,
Accords
but
Act
nope.
and the Canadian Sustainable Jobs Act are key to unlocking generational economic opportunities for Canada. The Atlantic Accords Act allow for the development of an offshore wind industry that will create thousands of jobs in Atlantic Canada. The Sustainable Jobs Act bring workers to the table and will equip them with the tools and the skills they need to thrive. I call upon the Conservative Party to end their wasteful filibuster and allow committee members to consider these bills. They should heed the call of premiers, of industry, of workers, and of this House to advance C-50 and C-49. They are simply wasting time and the money of taxpayers.
The honourable member from Vancouver, Kingsway.
Mr. Speaker, the NDP moved a motion at Health Committee to launch an independent public inquiry into Canada's COVID response. Shockingly, the Conservatives joined with the Liberals to defeat this common-sense proposal. New Democrats believe Canadians deserve transparency and accountability on how their government handled every aspect of the pandemic. No stone should be left unturned. Can the Prime Minister explain why his party teamed up with the Conservatives to block this overdue, essential inquiry?
It's interesting. That didn't sound like a coalition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank
government
my honourable
member
colleague for his question and his work in this space. As he knows, and as I mentioned earlier in question period, Canada had among the best responses to COVID-19 anywhere in the world. Thanks to vaccines and to other measures, we saved literally hundreds of thousands of lives, something we should be deeply proud of. We are going to be conducting not only a review that the member is talking about, a review, forward-facing review, but there are all kinds of reviews now to take the lessons that we learned during the pandemic and apply them to our entire health system. I want to thank everybody who was on the front lines of keeping us safe. We're going to honor that work by making sure we learn and do everything we can to keep people safe.
It's only been 10 minutes, but remember when he flipped out there a couple of minutes ago? So he's capable of going nuts. It's good.
24 Liberal MPs supposedly represent Toronto. Using the Minister of Rural Development's handbook to get things done, how come none of those 24 MPs stood up for people sleeping on Toronto streets? They were also missing in action to get the government to honor its promise to assist Toronto with our COVID budget shortfall. Mr. Speaker, many Torontonians will struggle to heat and hopefully keep their homes this winter. They'd like a carbon tax deferral too. Mr. Speaker, while the two Liberal MPs from Alberta can hold their regional caucus in a phone booth, can the Prime Minister explain how this Toronto 24 have simply disappeared?
Just like that, poof, it was gone.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Fails to mention the advocacy of Toronto MPs that pushed for this government to invest no less than $290 million for the City of Toronto so it could respond to homelessness challenges. And that's exactly what's happening. We will continue to work with that municipality, with other municipalities across the country. This is an unacceptable situation that we find ourselves in, but we have a choice. Do we respond, and how do we respond? We respond with cooperation, Mr. Speaker. We respond by working together, and that's what we'll continue to do.
I wish to
Greg's
mention
going to give a speech.
The presence in the gallery of the winners of the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council of Canada Awards, including the John C. Pauliani Award, the Brockhouse Canada Prize for Interdisciplinary Research in Science and Engineering, the Donna Strickland Prize for Social Services and Engineering Research,
what is
the
this?
Synergy Awards for Innovation.
What is going on?
And the Arthur B. McDonald Fellowships. Ladies and gentlemen.
He's making announcements now? Oh, they're acknowledging a group. Oh, that's nice. We'll give them some fireworks, huh? Good for them. Oh, well, Lord. It came to a very quick ending. What a crazy episode. The beginning of that, Poilievre was on fire. So many times he got up and spoke and was, where's Trudeau? Tell him to get out from hiding under his desk. That stuff's crazy. So much fun, Canadian politics. They don't do it like this in many countries. They don't let him go at it like this. Greg Fergus gets up and for 5 minutes stands there hoping that they'll quiet down, and they don't. He had to give in. Anyways, that's a pretty fun episode, guys. Just to let you know, I make clips of these in case you want to check out a few of the shorts that I have on my channels. I make other videos as well, not just these long, full length. Anyhow, please check out any of those videos if you'd like to. That's it. I'm Ehren, Question Period Canada. Like and subscribe. We'll catch you next time. We will be back tomorrow to see if Trudeau shows up. Hopefully he will. We'll see what happens. Have a good night, guys. Stay warm. If you can't turn on the heat, try to stay warm. We'll catch you later. Have a good night.